name is Nishat Noor and welcome to Millennium Headlines. This week's top headlines are: Mueller team questions Trump friend Tom Barrack. Investigators working for special counsel Robert Mueller have interviewed one of President Donald Trump's closest friends and confidants, California real estate investor Tom Barrack, the Associated Press has learned. Barrack was interviewed as a part of the federal investigation of possible coordination between the Trump campaign and Russia in the 2016 election, according to three people familiar with the matter who spoke on condition of anonymity to discuss private conversations. Specific topics covered in questions from Mueller's team were not immediately clear. One of the people who spoke to AP and the questioning focused entirely on two officials from Trump's campaign who have been indicated by Mueller: Trump's former campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, and Manafort's longtime deputy, Rick Gates. Gates agreed to plead guilty to federal conspiracy and false statement charges in February and began cooperating with investigators. The specific topics covered in questions from Mueller's team were not immediately clear. One of the people who spoke to AP said questioning focused entirely on two officials from Trump's campaign who have been indicated by Mueller: Trump's former campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, and Manafort's longtime deputy, Rick Gates. Gates agreed to plead guilty to federal conspiracy and false statement charges in February and began cooperating with investigators. The person said Barrack was interviewed months ago and was asked a few questions about Gates' work on Trump's inaugural committee, which Barrack chaired, but there were no questions about the money raised by the committee. Barrack's spokeswoman, Lisa Baker, declined to comment. Barrack was rare access and insight into Trump going back decades since their days developing real estate. Barrack played an integral role in the 2016 campaign as top fundraiser at the time when many other Republicans were shunning the upstart candidate. Barrack later directed Trump's inauguration. While the specifics of Barrack's questioning were unclear, Mueller's team has asked several other witnesses about the flow of money related to the campaign. Hawaii braces for a long upheaval as erupting Kilauea boils. Hundreds of anxious residents on the Big Island of Hawaii hunkered down Saturday for what could be weeks or months of upheaval as the dangers from an erupting Kilauea volcano continued to grow. Lava spurted from volcano vents, toxic gas filled the air, and strong earthquakes, including a magnitude 6.9 tremor on Friday, rocked an already jittery population. The trifecta of natural threats forced the evacuation of more than 1,700 people from communities near the lava and prompted the closure of parks, college campuses, and a section of the main road to the area of the Big Island's southern tip. 5 structures have burned and thousands of customers briefly lost power for one of the larger quakes. Tisha Mira Montoya, 45, said toxic fumes escaping from the lava vents weren't enough to make her family evacuate, but the tipping point were the earthquakes. I felt like the whole side of our hill was going to explode, she said. The earthquake was what made us start running and start throwing guinea pigs and bunnies in the car. Montoya, her husband, and her daughter don't know how long they will be away from the 3-story octagonal house they built nearly 20 years ago from a patch of raw jungle. My heart and soul's there, she said in a phone interview from a cabin on the north side of the Big Island, where the family had hunkered down. I'm nothing without the land. It's part of my being. Tina Neal, the scientist in charge of the U.S. Geological Survey's Hawaiian Volcano Observatory, warned distressed residents at a community meeting late Friday that eruptions could last longer than the ones from earlier this week, and earthquakes and aftershocks could continue for days, even weeks. Gary McMillan said his home about 3,000 feet from one of the fissures that is spewing lava and gas into the Leilani estates. Gary McMillan said his home is about 3,000 feet from one of the fissures that is spewing lava and gas into Leilani estates. He has remote cameras set up in his home and says that as of now, his home is still intact. He's living out of his van and his wife at the nearby community center and constantly thinks about the things they were forced to leave behind, but understands why authorities are keeping residents out. The lava lake at Kilau's summit crater dropped significantly, suggesting that magma was moving eastward toward Puna, a mostly rural district of forests, papaya farms, and lava fields left by past eruptions. More than 30 mishaps from armed adults at schools. They are the good guys with guns, the National Rifle Association says are needed to protect students from shooters. A school police officer, a teacher who moonlights in a law enforcement, a veteran sheriff. Yet in a span of 48 hours in March, the three were responsible for gun safety lapses that put students in danger. The school police officer accidentally fired his gun in his Virginia office, sending a bullet through a wall into middle school classroom. The teacher was demonstrating firearm safety in California when he mistakenly put out a round in the ceiling, injuring 3 students who were hit by falling debris. And the sheriff left a loaded service weapon in a locker room at a Michigan middle school, where a 6th grader found it. All told, as Associated Press review of news reports collected by the North-Profit Gun Violence Archive reveal more than 30 publicly reported mishaps since 2014 involving firearms brought onto the school grounds by law enforcement officers or educators. Guns went off by mistake, were fired by curious or unruly students, and were left unattended in bathrooms and other locations. If this can happen with a highly trained police officer, why would we give teachers guns? Interim Superintendent Louis Berlin of the Alexandria, Virginia school system asked after the incident involving the officer whose accidental discharge put a bullet through a wall at George Washington Middle School. He was placed on leave and is under investigation. The accidents are rare, but the actual number is probably higher because schools are not required to report them, and they have frightened students, outraged parents, prompted disciplinary and criminal investigators, and left at least 9 people injured. Some insurance companies have refused to cover schools that allow non-law enforcement personnel to be armed, and many school employees have said in surveys that they would feel less safe if more of their colleagues were carrying weapons. Justify when sloppy Kentucky Derby. Baffert gets 5th title. If you want to bust a racing curse, call Bob Baffert. The white-haired train smashed a jinx that stood for 136 years when Justify splashed through the slop to win the Kentucky Derby by 2.5 lengths on Saturday. Not since Apollo in 1882 had a colt won the Roses without racing as a 2-year-old. Now, Baffert is in position to make another run at the Triple Crown. 3 years ago, he trained American Pharoah to the sport's first swipe of the Derby, Preakness, and Belmont in 37 years. Records and streaks are made to be broken, and Baffert is certainly on a tear. The chestnut colt that began his career in February improved 4-0, winning his races by a combined 21.5 lengths and gave Baffert in his 5th Derby victory. It snapped a tie and left 65-year-old trailing only Ben Jones with 6. Mike Smith earned his 2nd Derby victory, becoming at 52 the 2nd oldest winning jockey. Bill Shoemaker was 54 when he won the Ferdinand in 1986. Smith crossed the finish line at Churchill Downs with only a few specks of mud on his white and green silks in the rainiest Derby in the race's 144-year history. Nearly 3-inch fell on the crowd of 157,813 throughout the day. Amazing horse, Smith said. He's got that it factor. He's so above average, he's got unbelievable talent, and he's got a mind to go with it. He was loving this stuff. Smith's silk were nearly spotless after he kept Justify near the lead throughout the race. He gunned Justify out of number 7 spot in the starting gate, something Baffert said had to happen. And the Colt's early speed helped hook leader promises fulfilled from the start. Good Magic was the only horse to have a serious shot as Justified turning for home. Good Magic under Jose Ortiz drifted out while Justified and Smith kept a clear and straight inside path. The victory was worth $1,432,000 to owners Winstart Farm, China Horse Club, Starlight Racing, head of Plains Partners. Doctors reject Trump's war zone comments on London crime. Some British doctors and legislators reacted angrily Saturday to President Donald Trump's pro-gun comments at an NRA convention comparing a London hospital to a war zone because of knife crime. Trump's provocative comments are expected to increase concerns about his planned first presidential visit to Britain on July 13th. Dr. Martin Griffiths, a surgeon at the Royal London Hospital, tweeted that he would be happy to invite Mr. Trump to visit his hospital and meet his London's mayor and police chief to learn how the city has reduced violent crime. Dr. Karim Brohi, another Royal London surgeon, said Trump's position makes no sense. There is more we can all do to combat this violence, but to suggest guns are part of the solution is ridiculous, Brohi tweeted. Gunshot wounds are at least twice as lethal as knife injuries and more difficult to repair. At the NRA convention Friday in Dallas, Trump said Britain has tough gun laws, but that one London hospital is awash with blood because of knife wounds. They don't have guns. They have knives, and instead, there's blood all over the floors of this hospital, Trump said. They say it's as bad as a military war zone hospital. Knives, knives, knives. French Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian expressed his firm disapproval of Trump's remarks and vigorously defended France's gun controls. Free circulation of weapons in society does not constitute a rampart against terrorist attacks. To the contrary, it can facilitate this type of attack, he said in a statement Saturday. The U.S. president plans a one-day stop in Britain as a part of a working visit. He has been invited for a state visit to be hosted by Queen Elizabeth II, but no date has been set for the ceremonial event. Trump has riled many Britons in the past by suggesting that Muslim extremists have made some British cities unsafe. He also drew criticism from Prime Minister Theresa May, a conservative, and other political leaders for retweeting anti-Muslim videos originally posted by one of the leaders of the far-right Britain First group. Trump has criticized London's Metropolitan Police and Mayor Sadiq Khan, a Muslim, on several occasions. Nearly 1,600 reported arrested in Russian anti-Putin protests. Russians angered by the impending inauguration of Vladimir Putin to a new term as president protested Saturday in scores of cities across the country, and police responded by reportedly arresting nearly 1,600 of them. Among those arrested was protest organizer Alexei Navalny, the anti-corruption campaigner who is Putin's most prominent foe. Police seized Navalny by the arms and legs and carried the thrashing activist to Moscow's Pushkin Square, whose thousands were gathered for an unauthorized protest. Police also used batons against protesters who chanted Putin is a thief and Russia will be free. Police used batons against protesters who chanted Putin is a thief and Russia will be free. The protest demonstrated that Navalny's opposition, although considered beleaguered by Russian officials and largely ignored by state-controlled television has seizable support to much of the country. I think that Putin isn't worthy of leading this country. He has been doing it for 18 years and has done nothing good for it, said Moscow demonstrator Dmitry Niktenko. He would leave for good. He should leave for good. OVD Info, an organization that monitors political repression, and late Saturday that 1599 people have been detained at demonstrations at 26 Russian cities. Moscow police said about 300 people were detained in the capital. State news agencies said, and there was no official countryside tally. Video showed some demonstrators being detained. Putin is to be inaugurated for a new 6-year term on Monday after winning re-election in March with 77% of the vote. Navalny had hoped to challenge him on the ballot but was blocked because of a felony conviction in a case that supporters regard as falsified in order to marginalize him. White House calls China's warning to airlines Orwellian nonsense. The White House is publicly admonishing China for warning foreign airlines to change how they identify Taiwan and other areas on their websites. More than 30 airlines, including some U.S. carriers, were recently told by the Civil Aviation Administration of China to remove any information suggesting Taiwan, Hong Kong, or Macau are not part of China. This is Orwellian nonsense, White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders said in a statement Saturday. We call on China to stop threatening and coercing American carriers and citizens. She called the effort part of a growing trend by the Chinese Communist Party to impose its political views on American citizens and private companies. The Chinese government did not immediately return to a request for comment. China considers self-governed Taiwan to be an integral part of its territory and come down hard on any suggestions to the contrary. Hong Kong and Macau are special administrative regions of China. American Airlines confirmed earlier this week that it received a letter from the CAAC. Delta, meanwhile, was publicly scolded earlier this year by the CAAC for listing Taiwan and Tibet as countries on its website. The airline quickly apologized and fixed the issue. The State Department said earlier this week that it's aware of the CAAC orders to several U.S. airlines and has reached out to the Chinese government to raise strong concerns. With its growing ranks of middle-class consumers eager to travel, China is an important market for global airlines. The International Air Transport Association forecast last year that China would surpass the United States as the world's top aviation market by 2020. U.S. slams abusive North Korean regime after Trump calls Kim honorable. The U.S. State Department issued a scathing rebuke of North Korea's human rights record on Wednesday, calling the regime one of the most repressive and abusive governments in the world, just days after President Donald Trump praised dictator Kim Jong-un's honorable intentions ahead of a possible face-to-face sit-down between the two leaders. While Trump has recently dialed back the personal insults against the leader he once called Little Rocket Man, his State Department did not pull any punches in a new statement condemning decades of egregious human rights violations suffered by the North Korean people at the hands of their own government. For more than 60 years, the people of North Korea have faced egregious human rights violations in virtually every aspect of life. The statement from State Department spokesperson Heather Nauert said. In addition to the roughly 100,000 individuals, including children and family members of the accused who suffer in political prison camps, North Koreans faces an almost complete denial of fundamental freedoms by their own government. Those trying to flee the oppressive environment, if caught, are often tortured or killed, she said. The administration has recently tried to strike a tone of cautious optimism as Trump and Kim gear up for a highly anticipated and potentially historic summit in the coming weeks. The North Korean government's long history of abusive practices has been an elephant in the room as Trump focuses on convincing Pyongyang to take concrete steps towards dismantling its nuclear and missile programs. But on Wednesday, the State Department opted to recognize North Korean freedom. The State Department stopped short of detailing exactly how the U.S. plans to press for accountability or indicating whether Trump plans to address these concerns with Kim directly when the two meet, but did pledge to help open up the isolated country to the rest of the world. Thank you for watching Million Headlines. This has been Nishat Noor. See you next week.